respected panelists for the day, Dr. Ajit, Ranade, Mr. Shyam, Srinivasan, CA Dipan, Mehta, moderator for today, past president of our society, CA Shariq, Contractor, my office bearers, dignitaries, members of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, members of the Cricket Club of India, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you to this experts chat on current economic scenario, how India can achieve $5 trillion economy. At this stage, I would like to acknowledge in absentia CA Nilesh Vikamsi, past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, who is going to join us very shortly. He is an integral part of the BCA fraternity, BCA family, and today he has helped us in organizing, getting two of the panelists. At this stage, I would also acknowledge the support of Mr. Prema Rudani, the president of CCI, and the executive committee of the Cricket Club of India for this event. It is a pleasure for our society to be associated with this prestigious club, of which I also happen to be a member, in organizing this panel discussion for the benefit of the members of both the organizations. I once again welcome the members of the CCI club to this event today. For the benefit of all the non-members and of the panelists, I would like to introduce the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society to you. The Bombay Chartered Accountants Society was formed in 1949, and it is just 6 days younger to our Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which is the regulatory body. BCAM or BCAS, as it is popularly called, is a public charitable trust, and it is the leading, perhaps the oldest and the largest voluntary organizations of chartered accountants in the country. It is a principle-centric, learning-oriented organization promoting quality service and excellence in the profession of chartered accountants. Over the past 70 years, it enjoys a very high level of credibility amongst its members and in the profession. It is considered as an organization that is innovative, ethical, and for the quality of its educating programs. Its programs and publications are considered to be one of the highest quality, and its journal is one of the best in the profession. Currently, we have about 9,000 plus members, but at the same time, we have more than 33,000 social media followers, and we clock approximately 2.5 lakh hours of training annually. Our constitution allows only chartered accountants to be members, but all those who are non-chartered accountants can always follow us on the 4 leading social media platforms on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, wherein we have updates for all our programs, and recording of such events are uploaded on our YouTube channels, where you all can watch it at your leisure. BCA also acts as a catalyst for bringing out better and more effective government policies and laws for a clean and efficient administration and governance. In this endeavor, we make numerous representations to the government on matters affecting the profession as well as common man's life. More recently this year, like every year, we also made a detailed representation to the government on the pre-budget memoranda, giving our wish list. This pre-budget memoranda is available on our website at free of cost for downloading for your reference. Further, I would also like to add that when the GST return was introduced, our institute had given a very detailed 43-page audit report, but it was on our recommendation that the GST audit report, which is in wait today, is a much shorter, precise one. And at many a times we get hearings from the Finance Ministry to vet our case. Some of the initiatives that the BCA takes is that we would like to organize more such joint events with other professional bodies, and as we have done in the past, and we also, jointly we are knowledge partners with many other organizations like the Rotary and other such organizations, even out of the city of Bombay. More so, second initiative that we have also taken is we have digitalized all our contents, and they are available on pen drive for your referencing. And last thing, most importantly, I think so even it's of the interest of the panelists, that we have a concept of BCS at your doorstep, where we tailor-make a training program for the corporate at your convenience. We come to your doorstep and we are just an arm's length away. If you have any training to be done, for example, we did a training when the Companies Act was introduced for HPCH. Just now we are doing audit for a public sector bank, wherein actually, we are going to take through the merger process. Like we already have an experience of Bank of Baroda and other banks are going to follow suit. So that we do. Now, friends, coming to today's panel discussion, it is a fact that our country is passing through a tough time and we are facing recession in growth. Many of the economic parameters like consumption, household saving, government spending, private sector investments, borrowing for further investments, the stress in the banking sector due to bad loans, etc., at a discomforting level. Yet we are getting conflicting signals. The GDP growth rate is reducing, but the stock markets are soaring. Banks are flushed with funds, but there are few takers to the loans. Doing business is getting easier, but nobody is investing and doing business. Consumption is flattening, but the government can't spend. Government has supported the farmers at the cost of the middle class, but the farm income isn't growing. To find answers to all these questions and to address many more, we have organized this panel discussion in the form of an experts chat. I thank the panelists and the moderator for spending their valuable time and agreeing to be part of this experts chat. Friends, now an expert chat is incomplete without experts, and one of them is the anchor for today's discussion, moderator CA Shariq Contractor. Let me introduce Shariq Contractor to you, and it's a pleasure and honor to introduce CA Shariq Contractor. He is a chartered accountant and he is an all India merit list in both the final as well as intermediary examination. He is a commerce graduate from the Sindham College of Commerce and Economics and also has a bachelor's degree in law from the Government Law College, Bombay. He has completed courses on data processing concepts, logic and techniques, and system analysis and design from the National Institute of Information Technology. He is one of the principal and founder partners of the chartered accountancy firm called C&K and Associates, LLP. The C&K group has branches and associate firms in 8 different locations, including the UAE, Dubai. C&K today has a staff strength of about 550 plus members, and currently there are 29 partners, and I happen to be one of them. He is a third generation CA in the family, and he has successfully transformed a family-run firm into a totally professional firm run today. He specializes in strategy, consulting, tax advisory, business restructuring, valuations, M&A, and exchange regulation laws. He also was the past president of this particular society in the year 2002-2003. His tenure as chairman on the board of the INA Group, an International Association of Independent Network Professional Accounting Firms, just ended in November 2019. He was the chairman and independent director of the board of BNP Paribas Trusteeship India Private Limited from 2004 to 2018. Also was chairman of the audit committee of the same company. He sits and is in the past has sat on the boards of many prestigious companies. He has co-authored 5 publications on professional subjects including taxation and laws applicable to charitable trust, capital gains, fringe benefit tax and other similar topics. He was the member of the managing committee of the Willingdon Sports Club and on the squash committee of the Bombay Gym. He is an active squash player, represents Bombay Gym in inter-club squash tournaments, and even today he manages to play squash at least 3 or 4 times in a week. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Shariq Contractor. I would request our Vice President Suhas to hand over a memento to Shariq. I would request our Treasurer Abhay to introduce the remaining of the panelists. Thank you.
President Manish, Vice President Suhas, past President of the Institute Nilesh Bhai, office bearers, seniors in the profession and friends. I feel a bit flattered. I am not introducing one speaker, but I am introducing 3 panelists, and all the 3 are achievers in their own field. And it is my privilege that I am able to stand over here and introduce all the 3 of them before you. First of all, I will introduce Dr. Ajit Ranade. Ajit Ranade is Group Executive President and Chief Economist with the Aditya Birla Group, an Indian multinational conglomerate with operations in more than 48 countries with head office in Mumbai. Dr. Ranade is a B.Tech in Electrical Engineering from IIT Bombay, an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, and has done his PhD in Economics from Brown University. Dr. Ranade is the member of Economic Policy Council of the CII and a member of the National Executive Committee of FICCI. He is a board member of the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics and member of Academic Council of Meghnad Desai Academy of Economics. He also chairs the Research Advisory Panel of the Indian Institute of Banking and Finance. He has served on the various committees of RBI, including the Committee on Fuller Capital Account Convertibility. And he is a regular columnist for Mumbai Mirror, First Post and Business Standard. And I will just confess that I'm interested in articles in Business Standard which I read avidly. Now I will come to Mr. Srinivasan, Managing Director and CEO at Federal Bank. He is an alumnus of IIM Calcutta and Regional Engineering College, Tiruchirappalli. He has also been up to London Business School for Leadership Development Program. Prior to joining Federal Bank, Mr. Shyam Srinivasan has worked with leading multinational banks in India and overseas across Middle East, India and Southeast Asia. When he took charge as the Managing Director and CEO of Federal Bank in 2010, he was convinced that the importance of keeping pace with the changing times for the bank to remain relevant in today's times is to make customers digitally empowered. He has been instrumental in kickstarting the digital journey of Federal Bank and launched the first of its kind Open It Yourself account opening app, Fedbook Selfie. Under his leadership, Federal Bank was recently listed in the Forbes Asia 200 Best Over a Billion Companies, wherein Federal Bank is one of the only two banks from India. Under his able stewardship, Federal Bank has been aggressively pursuing quality growth. He is a true believer in the dharma of leadership. His leadership skill lies in being a signpost to his people. A recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award from NIT Trichy and IIM Calcutta, he is a speaker of stature in banking circles, media as well as the country. He is also an honorary fellow and governing council member of Indian Institute of Banking and Finance. He is a great believer in technology and avid follower of sports, especially cricket. And he would be excited today that we have won today in the super over. Lastly, I will say he is a charismatic leader who always exudes youthful energy, which you can see on his face currently also. Now I will turn to Mr. Dipan Mehta. He is one of us. He is a qualified chartered accountant. In 1992, when BSE offered membership for the second time in its history to qualified professionals, Dipan Mehta had applied and was selected by the BSE board from a pool of over 300 applicants. Currently, he is the CEO and MD of Elixir Equities Private Limited, a respected stockbroking house offering the entire gamut of stockbroking, portfolio management and demat services. Under his leadership, Elixir has launched India's first smart investing platform, which is an automated portfolio management application designed to identify weak underperforming stocks and offer suggestions to replace these with high quality outperforming shares. His vision of investing in superior secular growth businesses has borne fruit over the years through exceptional returns for investors. He has always believed in long-term investing based on in-depth research. His views and thoughts are well sought after by the media, and he is a regular invitee on most business TV channels on TV, which I also follow regularly. He has also addressed investor conferences on behalf of CNBC and BSE Training Institute at various Indian cities. He regularly conducts courses at BSE Training Institute on portfolio management and smart investing. He is a member of the Rotary Club of Bombay and managing committee member of Association of NSE Members, Western Region. Now, I will request Suhas to hand over a memento as a token of our respect to Mr. Dipan Mehta. I will request Nilesh Bhai to hand over a memento as a token of our love and respect to Mr. Shyam Srinivasan. and also to Mr. Dr. Ajit Ranade. Nilesh Bhai, also to Dr. Ajit Ranade, please. floor is yours, Mr. Shariq.
Thank you, Manish, for a very, very kind introduction. I think the panelists were a little amused with the introduction that you gave, but I think that's a privilege of having your partner as giving an introduction to you. I think it's a pretty, very, very interesting topic that we have decided today, and we have excellent panelists. I'm sure we're going to have some wonderful discussions. The Prime Minister set the ball rolling by announcing and making a statement that India should reach the target of $5 trillion economy by 2024, that is in time for the next general election. It's a statement, for a lot of us, it is a vision statement, and a lot of people believe that it's a right kind of vision statement because it is difficult to achieve, but if we try and work in the right direction, perhaps not impossible to achieve. For a lot of others, it's an impractical target and perhaps not the right target to chase at all. There's an interesting quote in the Bhagavad Gita which says that what stands between us and our greatest goals is not obstacles but clearer visions to lesser goals. I like that quote because it talks about clearer visions, not easier visions. So a $5 trillion economy is not an easy goal, but it is perhaps a clearer goal. Is that so? Maybe the panelists will want to throw some light on that. India today is an economy which is 190 lakh crores, or converted into dollar term, it is a $2.8 trillion economy, which means in the next 4.5 years, we must double our size of the economy in order to reach the magic figure. Again, considering all the headwinds and what the President talked about, all the headwinds and the contradictions that we are facing, is that an achievable target? Is again a question that needs to be debated. India is the 5th largest economy in the world. We have, by some statistics, just crossed UK as the 5th largest economy. Does that mean the Indians are the 5th richest people in the world? The answer clearly is no. And if we really want to measure economic well-being of people, maybe we should measure them in terms of per capita GDP. If we take Britain and India, it's more or less the same size economy, but the average UK national would be earning 21 times more than an average Indian. So that needs to be kept in perspective. Also, it is important to understand that we are talking about the economy in terms of dollars. So there are two important parameters that we have to control to reach this target. One is inflation, and second is the exchange rate between dollar and rupee. What is the rate at which we must grow? And again, if you see the Economic Times today, it talks about a lot of parameters where India is faltering. So what is the rate at which we must grow? Let's assume that the inflation remains at 4%. We know in the budget what happens because a lot of people feel that we must now not worry so much about inflation and try and achieve growth. But let's assume that inflation remains at 4%. Let's assume the exchange fluctuation is at less than 2% or 2%. Then the economy must grow at the rate of 9%. If you add 4% of inflation, the nominal growth of 13%, shave off 2% on account of rupee depreciation, 11% growth in dollar terms would achieve us again the figure of 5 trillion economy. Whether it's achievable or not will depend again on whether we fire on all cylinders. A lot of areas should come together. Investment should be mobilized greater, consumption should pick up, exports need to pick up, and all the other aspects of the economy have to perform. It's not just the service sector, but the manufacturing and most importantly the agriculture sector, which has been actually a drawback, which is holding India back because there is so much dependence on agriculture, and yet that sector has not really been performing. It is a leg up, and that needs to be managed. And also clearly, if the target is to be achieved, then it is important that the private sector joins the party. And I think today there is a lot of diffidence, there is a lot of fear, and there is a lot of mistrust in the way the private sector is operating, and maybe the government needs to make the right economic moves, the right policy decisions, and let's see what happens in the budget to give that impetus to see that the entrepreneur spirit comes back alive, because right now there is a feeling that the government is getting diverted into too many areas which is not directly helping the economic growth. But the bigger question that I would also like to raise with the panelists is this the right direction? Is this the right target? Take for example the World Happiness Report of the UN, where India is ranked very, very low. And happiness report is measured in terms of quality of education, quality of health, and the well-being of its citizens. We are low down in that. And should the government perhaps not spend more on health and economy? If you look budget after budget, very little amount is spent on these areas. And with the thrust on this growth again, whether equal amount will be spent on that or no is another question. Maybe we achieve a lesser target of GDP growth, but we may need to spend more on these areas. And then the income disparity that we have in India. By recent statistics, the top 1% of Indians own more than 70% of the wealth owned by the bottom 70%. Now this is a huge disparity, and if we give a thrust to economic growth and want to achieve the target, will we widen that gap? Because we just cannot afford to do that. Also, if the 20th century was all about economy, the 21st century is likely to be about ecology. Can we have this kind of a growth, and what impact would it have on the environment? It's a big question. We cannot possibly ape the Western model of growth because that cannot be sustained any longer. These are large questions because when you set a very, very tough target, sometimes the target becomes important and the other parameters fall short. So the bottom line is we all definitely want growth, or as the government would put it, we want Vikas. And Vikas is measured in terms of GDP. That's the commonest method of measuring growth. That's another issue. So we want growth, but we want the growth to be inclusive. And can it be inclusive? If it is inclusive, it should be with Sabka Saath. And therefore, the magic statement that the Prime Minister has made is perhaps a good target to have. Whether it's a great vision will depend on the manner in which the entire thing is implemented. And that is whether it is implemented with the other slogan of the government, which is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. I think with these opening words, I will have the panel discussion. The idea is that we will be having question answer sessions. Some questions will be to all of you, most questions will be individually to each one of you. And of course, if there are any additions or any other supplements that is to be given, it's great. If you have contradictions, it's even better, because that will make the entire event much more lively. And we will start the panel discussion. The first part of the question is to all of you. We've seen the Economic Times giving all this talk about the negative economic conditions. So the first question to you, Mr. Ranade, is the 5 trillion economy by 2024 achievable? And that's a question I'm going to ask all three. To you in particular, what are the structural changes that are required to see that we can achieve it? Is it achievable by the time?
No, I think you, Mr. Contractor, you did an excellent job summarizing the main point. There are two issues. One is this use of the word trillion. This was not there a few years ago. In India, if you had used the word trillion, a lot of people didn't know what this trillion was. So the fact that the Prime Minister is now constantly talking about trillion, I think on social media or on television, some people will say, batao trillion mein kitne zero hai. I'm not going to ask you. Because even on this Saturday, I think the Finance Minister still talks in terms of lakhs of crores. So one interesting thing is that the word usage of the word trillion, so which has an international kind of flavor to it. And the second is the usage of dollars. So the target is in terms of trillion and dollars, both of which are, I would say, not foreign but in international dimension. So as you said, it's actually to focus our thought, align everybody's thinking towards that goal. So it is not so much, for example, when you say that India should try and be in the top 50 rank of ease of doing business ranking of the World Bank. So then it gets everybody aligned to that kind of goal. So the $5 trillion, I would say, is to be thought in that terms, that It's an international metric, and it is not something which is actually far-fetched, because all said and done, as you said, you just showed, I don't know if it's 2024 or 2025, I think it's more like end of 2025. So if you count calendar year, all of 20, starting we are in January now, so all of 20, all of 21, all of 22, so that's actually 6 years. And you correctly sort of estimated it to be roughly 11% growth in dollar terms, which depending on the exchange rate and so on, so roughly double the size. Let's say that in real terms it's a double the size of the economy. And that's not something that is very far-fetched, but a lot of things will have to fall in place and work together. And perhaps in an environment where high growth is no longer the rule in the world. Even China is going down the most spectacular example of consistent high growth has been China in modern times. And even that economy is slowing down. They are finding it difficult to grow at 6% because perhaps of their size and their base effect. But we have the second richest country in the world in terms of, a second or third, which is Japan, which has grown at 0% for the last 30 years, 3 decades. Of course, there's a shrinking population, so per capita incomes are actually rising. Funnily enough, the standard of living in Japan keeps improving because even at 0% GDP growth rate, because per capita incomes are rising. So we are living in a world where very high growth of 11% in dollar terms is not going to be the rule. And especially after 2008, the financial crisis, the US had again an amazing record that last 11 years, not 12 years, the economy has been expanding. It's called I think now it is a historic, unprecedented record that the economy has expanded for 12 years in a row. The stock market also, I think, more or less has grown. And even that recovery, despite being unprecedented in history, is still weaker compared to recoveries from their past recessions. So if you look at the last maybe 100 years or 70 years, every time there was a recession in the US, it came out of a recession, there was economic expansion. And maybe not for 12 straight years, but maybe 7, 8, 9 years. So that expansion, that is if you start at base 100 and see whether it's gone up to 10 percentage points or 20%, because we can compare that. We can compare it across different recessions. The expansion in the US, even if it's unprecedented, is still weak compared to past recoveries from past recessions. So we are going to be trying to grow at 11% in dollar terms, India's $5 trillion, in a world context where high growth is no longer the rule. So that we have to be aware. Nevertheless, because India's economy is largely domestically oriented, we will keep working at it. And as you said, structurally, if you look at it from the production side, you can view GDP from two sides. Either from the spending side, what are people spending on? Where's the spending going? Or you can see from the production side, how is the categorization of production? So if you look at it from the production side, we produce food, we produce goods, or manufactured goods, and we produce services. So if you look at it from that perspective, if you want the entire, and by the way, these are just mirror images. Whether you measure GDP from the spending side, in which case you see what are the consumer spending, what are the factory, investment, or industrial investment spending, or government spending, or what are foreigners spending on Indian goods, which is called exports. So whether you measure it from the spending side or from the production side, the picture is the same. The number should be the same. So if your economy is growing at 11%, that number should turn out to be 11%, whichever way you look at it. So if you look at it from the production side, you need these categories, that is agriculture, industry and services, to collectively grow at 11%. Now you know that agriculture cannot grow at more than 3 or 4%, because we have limitation of, we can't expand, there's only so much real estate we have. There's only so much productivity growth you can get by putting on more and more fertilizer. Already large parts of India are suffering from high salinity, overuse of urea. We are a water-stressed country. Half of our arable land is not irrigated. We have anomalies like, say, in the state of Maharashtra, where only 3 or 4% of the land is under sugarcane, but 60% of the water is consumed. So agriculture, for various reasons, you don't need to get into the details, cannot grow at 3 or 4%. So if these three categories have to grow at 11% only, and one category which is almost 14% of GDP is growing only at 3% or 4%, imagine how much more the other two sectors will grow. So there is this structural aspect to it. But nevertheless, I think it just helps focus the attention. So the goal is more important than trying to forecast, whether we'll get there in 5 years. I think we'll get there, but if not 5, later. Is janam mein nahi to agle janam mein. So, but more importantly, the focus, getting everybody focused on that. Just to conclude, we had Mrs. Indira Gandhi started a Project Tiger. What is the Project Tiger? Remember that focus on increasing the tiger count in India.
That's the apex.
Because tiger is the apex of the pyramid of the entire flora and fauna. If the tiger is healthy and has enough food to eat and has a good, healthy growth, it means it's getting enough food. So the second layer is also growing well. If the second layer is going well, which is maybe, deers and antelopes, then they also must be getting enough food. That means the flora, the vegetation, the jungles, the forestry must be good. And then the insects. So that's why the Project Tiger. So if we take a Project Tiger approach to 5 trillion, but later on in the discussion I want to say that if you want to have a Project Tiger, let's not focus on a dollar number. That can come in the later. Let's focus on, let's say, infant mortality. Just one thing if you want to focus on. But we can come back to that later.
So yeah, interestingly, and I actually went on my calculator and tried to put the number of zeros that are there. It ran out of the digit space. But Mr. Srinivasan, again, the same question to you. You think it's achievable? And we're talking about achieving it by the target date of 5 years. And of course, what are the banking sector reforms that would be required to see that it is achieved?
Thank you. Yeah, theoretically it is right, or arithmetically, if you use the rule of 18, it will.
Yeah.
Right? So if you take rule of 72, 4 years will make it. But you yourself mentioned that that looks like a tall order. So I would go with what Ajit said. We shouldn't get too fussed by whether it's 24 or 25. But I think the larger point I have is that we have to abstract from that 5 trillion to what does it mean for everybody here, and actually not even everybody here. 40001 pin code is a much more healthier, richer pin code than many other pin codes that we talk about. So I think we have to look at through that context. And somebody mentioned in the inaugural that I am a cricket fan. I am, but not from an India point of view today. I don't want it to be like the T20 or the Super Over that New Zealand loses. But I'd rather be the Federer who comes from nowhere and wins. I think that's the takeaway we have to get from all that is happening around. Can India become the Federer and not the New Zealand? We joke at the last minute, right? And all that has happened is suggestive of the fact that suddenly the last 12 months is, last 12, 18 months is making a lot of self-doubt, and we're beginning to believe whether this 5 trillion is, and that 5 trillion, if you look, I have no clue what Mr. Modi's mind was, but I would believe he was setting that in the context of let's make it inclusive, let's get the big picture going and make India truly productive. And if you take that line and then look at all the other bylines, it is inclusive, it is making India a better place, best to do business, more people are happy, so which is what you also said. So I think answer is 5 trillion possible? Yes. Will it happen in the 3-4 year, 5 year time period? Arithmetically yes, but looks like the last 12 months, if you grow at 5%, you're talking about 9 years for it. So that's a far cry. I'm assuming that the many things that are set to happen, and all of us are looking at February 1 like it's a magic date where life will magically change. But I would say, and I was just thinking of coming up here, what would it be? Just to build on what Ajit said, I think ABCD. These are the 4 things I would say. First, what are the big things that are going to be done in the area of agriculture? Right? How is it going to, given all that exists, how are you going to inspire the agriculture economy? Yes, I understand it's only the growth rate of 3-4%, but that also we've not been registering. The second is a more, how big or how bold are we going to take those steps to maybe bust the fist and say, at this point in time, what is more important is get the juggernaut rolling and maybe take a bold call and say, boss, I will bust it, but still my borrowing limits will be like say less than 8 lakh crores. I don't know what that number is, but somewhere in there. The third is what are you going to do to inspire consumption, the C aspect, right? And lastly, which are the big divestments you're going to do to make sure that you're creating the revenues to fund the other activities. So really as a banker or just as a citizen of the country, I think extracting from sport? Will you be a Federer? Will you do the ABCD more in an inspired fashion? And 5 trillion, if it doesn't happen in 25, it will happen in 26. But getting there cannot be at the cost of something collapsing and then it becoming a catastrophe. So I think the next few years, and this at a time when you also mentioned about ecology, and if many of us followed what happened in Davos, this year the theme was entirely different. You know, for many years people have gone to Davos, many of us who are watchers, that is, I've only watched. The conversation was around climate change and the world is changing order. But this year that was the theme. If you speak to people who went, they are saying that this is real. Right? The narratives have shifted. Maybe the new order is lower growth, but sort of more spread, and the real issues of livelihood. Who have expected 10 days ago that all conversations would be about the coronavirus? Right? Whoever expected that 2 years back that the world will become a platform economy and everything is a service and everything is a subscription, nobody wants to invest. Right? And we may make light of the fact that people are not buying cars and taking Ubers, but probably it's true. Probably it's true that housing is no longer as consumed as it was. So in that context of a world changing, whether we like it or not, probably the youngsters don't buy. Maybe they consume but don't buy. So in that context, the order of changing everything has to be materially different. Therefore, reconstructing many things, building blocks changing, inputs changing, will affect the 5 trillion, but it will be good goal if more are achieving with all these new order changes. I mean, to my mind, when I started out in banking, or forget banking many years back, this last 10 years, the level of change, if I told you everything you can do in this device, all of us would have laughed. Today, I don't know whether any of you went into a bank, except coming to my bank, but never went into. So the order of play is changing. In that context, I still believe 5 trillion, the rupee equivalent of it, it's 12 zeros, incidentally, I know that. Am I right? It is 12 zeros.
190 lakh crores.
Yeah, and 12 zeros is
2.0.
So, will the 5 trillion happen? It's got to happen, right? The question is it 24 or 25? But if the milestones to make that happen, I mean, we said Chandrayaan, unfortunately, the last step didn't happen and the whole project was considered a failure. But there are a bunch of stuff that happened to got Chandrayaan, right? Which all were successes. So I would say the effort getting those milestones through as much as the destination. I'm not running away from the fact that the destination is important, but I think the journey has to be even more sort of fruitful. I come back to more information.
Yeah, I think importantly it is that, the statement is so many things need to fall in place to achieve it, and I think those so many things are important.
In a changing order.
Yeah.
The order of everything is changing quite materially, less visualized by anybody, right? Which is.
So anyway, to you, same question, Dipan. And again, from a financial sector, from the capital market sector, what are the reforms required? Now we've all decided we're going to achieve it. The question is when, it's a different matter, 24, 25, 26, but what are the steps required?
So I think both my fellow panelists have kind of explained this whole thing very well. All that I can add to this discussion at this point without repeating is that I think India is a very complicated country. And while Prime Minister Modi has got very noble thoughts and he's full of energy, vision, down the line somewhere I think that gets diluted. And what statements are made by the PMO's office or the PM himself or his key ministers on a day-to-day basis, they don't get translated because it's a complex country. We have bureaucrats, we have got different ministries, and then there are state governments and state bureaucrats. So it's a very complicated process. Some subjects are handled by the state, some subjects are handled by the central government, and then there is confusion between what is state and what is center. And then some states have got non-BJP government. So we are a hodgepodge when it comes to the political landscape, when it comes to our bureaucratic structure. And the intent, I think, for the Prime Minister was to galvanize all these various elements of the economy who can make a change and who can drive this particular mission or vision of his to get them going. So it's easier to, kind of motivate the lower rungs to act in a direction such that a $5 trillion economy is possible and can be facilitated. So that is one observation which is very positive and which is new from our country's point of view. The second is the emphasis of the Prime Minister on the economy. And I think that when the government decides that they want to do something at the absolute highest level, then they're putting all their energies behind that mission. So it's not something else like in the past we have got various streams or streaks of communism, or that, we wanted to just promote agriculture or food grain. We've had this, like this tiger, what he spoke about, Mr. Ranade. But this time I think the focus of the government, the Prime Minister, is on the economy, and that is very, very noteworthy. And mind you, since this $5 trillion economy goal has come, I would say that the recent cut in corporate tax is linked in that direction. So everybody's eyes, the PMO, the top minister, the top bureaucrats, the secretaries, they're all focused on getting the economy going. We all know it's a tough task, but I think if everybody works together, then certainly it is possible. And from a capital market point of view, I think we are in terms of the capital market system, the depth, the players which are there, the ease of doing business, the kind of regulation which is there in place is best in class. So from the capital market point of view, we are ready to take the economy to 5 trillion and beyond. It's just that we are the Dalal Street or the Wall Street, but the main street has to really actually perform. So, it's for them to really deliver, but we are there to support the growth in any way possible.
You want to react to that part?
So this is an old debate, actually. I'm glad you mentioned it. Does finance come first or growth come first? Incidentally, it is a very old debate. And old means more than 120 years, but the names associated with this debate is Mr. Schumpeter, around 1910, 1920, who strongly believed that you need to have a good financial system for people to engage in growth. And the opposite view is that if there is growth, the financial system will develop automatically. So if there is enterprise, if there are entrepreneurs, initially they will do informal lending, borrowing, financial system. Maybe in the north they call it committee, or what do you call it in Bombay? It's called it used to be called not chit fund, but Vishi, Bundi or Vishi. So the financial system will follow growth. When there is growth, the financial system will develop. The opposite view is that you need to develop the finance, growth will follow finance. So this is a very important debate. I think it's not a settled debate. I am kind of biased towards the growth leading finance. Where enterprise goes, finance will follow. So the very great success of microfinance is showing that, or the fact that we've gone from money lenders to NBFCs. So in your generation, my generation, I think typically you thought of buying a flat in your 40s or 50s. Buying a flat. Today, when people are in their 20s, they have no hesitation to go and take a housing loan. What that tells us is that a youngster today has great confidence. What do you do when you take a housing loan? You're borrowing from your future income. But for that you need to have confidence that I'm going to have future income, I'm going to have a job, So why do you have that confidence? Because there are financial systems developed now to be able to borrow from your own future. You're transferring income from your future to the present. That means the financial system is well oiled, well developed. So that's an example where a youngster, when they go and buy a house or a flat, that generates demand for steel and cement and workers. And then once you have a flat, you have to fill it up with white goods, furniture, and TV sets. All that leads to economic growth.
Yeah.
Why? Because we have a financial system which allows you, a young 25-year-old guy, to get a housing loan for 20 years. That's the financial part. But whether finance causes that growth or growth, so that's an important debate. But I think we're at that time, we're at that point in our economy where the financial system has developed sufficiently, and that also will contribute to some extent. So your question to him was right, that what does the financial system need to do? It needs to have well-developed credit markets. It needs, I'm taking your punchline, that you don't need to only think of giving loans to entrepreneurs based on their collateral. Aapke paas ghar hai kya, gaadi hai kya? No, I just want to see if you're a good guy. How do I know? I check your Facebook. I check your, your utility bills, your telephone bills, and because of big data and AI, I have access to that. Or he can now, with the new privacy bill, he can sell access to monetize the data trail, the digital trail. So it's enough for me as a lender to give you a loan based on your profile rather than collateral. So
Ranade basically is like husband and wife, Finance and growth are like husband and wife, fight all the time. When the crunch time, they're there for each other.
who is the wife?
That I want to comment on that.
Obviously the one who dominates, but again from a banking sector, they spoke about liquidity, they spoke about lending. What's happening? There is a liquidity problem that we are having. Excess capacity, high interest rate, consumption is not picking up. Perhaps the government is not making the right moves in this direction. What are the changes that are required to be done? Let's now talk about the pitfalls. What are the possible pitfalls where we are going wrong, which we need to rectify to see that we achieve this?
Yeah, I think the fact that liquidity is not there is not true. We're sitting on 3 lakh crores.
Yeah, but they're not lending. The banks are not lending.
So the issue therefore is not availability of resources, not availability of lending opportunities, right?
Yes.
I think it's well documented that if growth is low, then the investments have not happened. And probably at this juncture, I think it's less of a supply problem, more of a demand problem. Not I think, it is a demand issue, right? As you see, all the data that's coming out suggests that there is some kind of funk and it's not picking up. Though you're seeing some green shoots and one believes that it should sort of escalate. So the bankers are, for most, barring the ones who've been sort of affected by some historical issues, are ready to lend and are keen to lend. Right? I mean, particularly the entire private sector or the good ones are all pursuing, as are the big public sector. So I don't believe it's the banking system that is unwilling to lend. There are structural issues in banking system where they are nervous to lend and then get caught with other consequences, but I do believe even that is getting addressed. Even today's paper is talking about the public sector banks getting some kind of reprieve that as long as you're bona fide in your lending decision, you're not going to get sort of CVC, so to say. So I want to believe that those enablers are falling into place. I think the wash is happening in our system. Unfortunately, the last 3 years, so many things have come together, starting with demonetization, GST, the world order changing, and probably this flush that is happening right now should produce a different consequence. Now, some of the enablers that have happened, I do believe that maybe it's taking longer. The IBC process, the sort of confidence-giving measures for public sector, the capitalization of the public sector banks, hopefully we are at the tail end of the problem of the NPAs, should inspire them to go out and lend. I want to believe that the lending will be, if you see why is retail through all this still growing, at least for most banks, there is a certain degree of course people are shopping from one to the other, some moving of credit from A to B is happening, but the capacity that is there is getting utilized. Now for big projects to happen, if you see the last 12 months or this financial year, the credit growth at an industry level is sluggish, right? But I'm quite sure in the next 60 days before the end of the year, you will see at least close to 8-9% credit growth. So 40-50% of the credit is happening in the last last 2-3 months of the year. 2 points. One is typically tends to about 40% of the growth happens then. Second is, I think there's some resurgence, some kind of green shoots coming in. But is it a systemic issue? Are banks not willing to lend? I don't believe so. Are there lending opportunities? It's driven largely by the demand situation. Private sector investments have to kick in. For that, they are all looking for some of the enablers to come in. So I'm of the view over the next, if not 1 quarter, I always have this 2-quarter theory. Life will get better 2 quarters down, right? So you have to live in hope and pray that things just turn out okay. So at this juncture, it's kind of nebulous. But I go back to what I said at the beginning of my points. The structure of most economies, and ours is no exception, is fundamentally changing. Slightly different from what Ajit said. Today's 25-year-olds don't want to buy homes. A larger number of them, I don't know how many of you agree. If I do a poll, and I keep frequently doing it in our office, the level of, I'll tell you a live example, and this is data based. And in 10 years I've seen this. When I joined, the number of home loan applicants from a young executive in the bank where they give a softer loan was much higher than number of people who hire today don't want to take. Either they are privileged that they are the second generation, have already a home, therefore there's maybe the compulsion is less, or they are into life experiences and don't believe that they need to lock their cash flow in that and they want. So I think there is a more deeper issue, at least urban. This may not be true pan-India, but there is something that we need to understand. In that context, all our aspirations and our behavior have to need a reset. Many of us who are in the 50 plus have seen life through one lens, and many of us are in positions of business strategy and business development, but maybe the younger India, which is what it is playing the game very differently, and some of us, if I look around this room, most of us are well into our 50s, right? Sorry for the younger crowd. I'm not saying age is a discriminator, but there is certain behavioral biases that kick in. There is something structurally happening, and I don't have an answer, but I'm sure sensitive. Yes, ma'am. I would love to hear.
And in 5 years from now, they see themselves on a foreign soil.
That may be a very small percentage. Right? I'm giving you an example of our
dream doesn't mean that that's going to happen, but
It
yes,
will
I
happen.
think I agree with you.
It will happen
That
for
it
them.
is. That I believe what you are saying has very good sense. Today, people are more interested in renting rather than owning.
It's a subscription
Because
account,
that
it is.
gives them the opportunity to move on to wherever the opportunity is.
Not tied to anything.
Not tied to anything. And they are not necessarily interested in making money only. They are interested in being happy. Being happy is not necessarily making money. Being happy is fulfilling your dream, passion, which may not result in money immediately.
Correct.
So you are absolutely right. It's a whole change of belief system,
Thank
of
you. I
experience.
feel reassured. I was wondering whether I'm going to get beaten up for saying things that I should
I
not.
subscribe to it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Young people think that they have to own a house is an old concept.
I think so,
It's
sir.
an old concept now.
Now, I'll give you a live example if you allow me. I have two bright young nieces, both chartered accountants. Very conservative. We are a very typical time-prime conservative family. They did not have any flashy upbringing, Chennai based. Today, they got their job 18 months, 24 months back. Trip to Bali, trip to Phuket. Unheard of in our family, those were taboo words. I swear, these were taboo words. If at 55, if I tell my dad I'm going to Phuket, he'll say, "What's kya hua?" 24-year-old, she wants to go to Phuket. Booked. Bali, Phuket, Jaipur, what is that? This forest, tiger reserve. Every 3 months, 3-day shooting going on. They make decent money. Parents are doing well. They have no come back. And why should I drive? Why should I learn driving? Uber is there. I live in Mumbai. I can order Swiggy. Now, I know I'm mindful that this may be a very minority, metro-centric conversation, but it takes only a few years to percolate through the filter of. And I tell myself and the team, our business strategies and future plans are to be constructed in this reality. This is the new order.
Yeah.
In this new order, still you have to deliver 5 trillion and more.
Yeah.
Right? So,
It is a challenge, and I think we were discussing in our office also that children today don't want to buy cars again because they feel Uber is equally convenient. But I think the next question should go to Dipan because his wife has just walked in. So that's a good enough reason. But again,
power is shifted.
yes, he talked about all that. But Dipan, again, what he mentioned was that the banks are willing to lend. However, it seems the business community is unwilling to take that risk. The entrepreneurship is missing. The government is perhaps getting too involved in the business of doing business, which it should not. And we should be allowing more entrepreneurship to come to the forefront. Today, people are perhaps willing to sit on money and be money lenders rather than get into the active business activity. What's happening? What do you think?
I have a few observations on this subject. First of all, I think all the new enterprises which are coming in India, they don't require capital. If you see all the new startups, the unicorns, I mean, except for maybe a small finance bank or something like a Paytm, most new ventures don't require that much capital. Not like the old days where you had steel plants and power plants and the projects. So that is, one large portion of the new businesses do not require, at least they don't require bank funding. The kind of capital they require is private equity funding which is available in abundance, and then that is accountable and that understands this entire process of financing and is critical in taking the venture and the business opportunity to its logical end. So that is one part, that the entire way new businesses are coming up, the shape and form, their funding requirements are very different. That is one part. The second is that I think from the bank's point of view, and I don't know whether Mr. Srinivasan will agree, I think the bankers have burned their fingers so badly with large projects, infrastructure, steel, power, that one banker friend told me that it will take a generation before a bank or an institution actually lends to an infrastructure project. However well it may appear on paper, they don't want to touch it, and if they do, then I'm sorry, we in the market will short that stock. So the traditional ways of financing large-scale projects which require money has undergone a big change, and that is where I think the capital market intends to play a very important role, and this time it's more on the debt market side. So what I'm very thrilled about is these new vehicles which are coming, and SEBI is all the time trying to promote them, trying to understand what their problems are and tweak the regulation as it goes along, and they are also in active conversation with the finance ministry to make it easier for new generation vehicles like investment trusts, like AIFs, like opening up the debt market, making it easier to list, the entire retailization of the debt market. So I think more than the equity, what I've seen in the last 3-4 years is that the entire debt market, whichever form you may call it, we have an underdeveloped debt market, but that is coming to life, and we are seeing more and more of these larger projects or large funding requirements from the NBFCs or from large corporates going outside the banking system, which is also explaining why the credit growth is and the lending opportunities not as much as say a decade ago or so. So from that point of view, I think the capital markets, debt markets have a very critical role to play in getting to this $5 trillion magic figure. And as you go along, I think more and more innovation will come in financing, whichever form of financing is required, whether it is retail or infrastructure or large projects. But by and large, I think that the going is extremely good. And if you see the success which has come from some of these new vehicles, they are growing exponentially, and fortunately now, because of this financialization of savings and so many investment advisors and mutual funds and portfolio managers like us, we are trying to educate the investor about all these new products, what their risks are, what their returns are, how they can do their tax planning. And all of that is bearing a lot of fruit in terms of getting more and more savings into the productive side of the economy. Gone are the days when, an average businessman or somebody who's got large income would invest just in land or real estate or gold. Now everybody wants to get into financial assets, and this is something, I've been 30 years in the market, I've never seen the growth of the mutual fund industry or the portfolio management industry the way I've seen in the last 5-7 years or so, and that's a fantastic development for this country. I think it was something which was lacking for so many years. I mean, we have a 150-year history of the stock market, but it was always very few. Now we see millions and millions of people accessing the stock market, providing the requisite capital which is required. So I think that's a very important differentiation of this particular century as compared to any of the earlier ones.
I think if I may, sorry, you want to
Just to only add, when we think of banks, we think of as a conventional lender. I think the definition of banking is changing. Go back to what Bill Gates said 25 years back. That's why he is who he is, the vision he had. He said then, by the 2020s, whatever, banking will be required, banks will not be required. That is where his line is, right? And we tend to think of banks in a conventional sense. I am with Dipan's view. Lending for the long tenor and so on and so forth may never be the bank's forte any longer. It should not be. Because your source of money is short money. Trying to do some big ticket, long tenor is not your scene. So banks' architecture is changing. Banks are becoming platforms. We should and will be the pass-through, the clearing system, right? And will be the platform on which everything should pass through. So, and I keep telling most of our friends in the market who are analysts and investors, please don't extrapolate your last 10 years and tell the next 10. It is not going to be. I can guarantee it won't be. Therefore, your financial projections have to change. It's the smartness, it's the swiftness, the nimbleness of banks to play the game differently. That's going to differentiate the next player. To extrapolate saying I'll do 1.8 ROA, this and that, I think is because information asymmetry is dying now. Right? If I don't know, Google knows. So it's only who executes better. So this order of play is changing by a magnitude which are, and that period is now, we are not recognizing it. Or many of us are believing that it's not happening. So I go with him that the next 3-5 years, maybe 3-5 short, this decade things will change. Capital and lenders will be very different.
No, so we are going through absolute disruptive times. We all agree on that. But just to change now, I mentioned earlier about that we have a very unequal society. There are two ways of making a GDP growth and achieving this target. Focus on the top 300 million people and not on the bottom 1 billion. Both ways you can achieve. Perhaps the easier way is to focus on the top, but can we afford to do that? Can we, today a lot of people consider India as an unequal society, more unequal than China, which itself is an unequal society. Can we afford, and would this kind of a thrust be at the expense of opening up those fissures even more? The inequality part between.
So inequality is rising not just in India but across the world. Whether you go to China, Brazil, South Africa, even as you know USA. In fact, the election of President Trump was largely because of a phenomenon where the families or households in the Midwest or in the so-called, the industrial belt, their household incomes were stagnating for many years, and they were not able to see their participation in the economic expansion. The economy of the US was growing and quite well, I mean at 2-3% consistently, but household incomes of these people in the Midwest was stagnant for many years, decades. Which means that the overall economy, the gains were not going to the middle income, but they were going to at the top end, and inequality is rising. So it's not an Indian phenomenon; it's all over the world. But strangely enough, the global inequality is actually going down because the incomes of India and China, when they rise, per capita income, and a per capita income of households, a large number of middle income households in USA stagnate. If you measure inequality for the whole, if the whole world was one country, then actually inequality, so that's the great irony or a very apparent paradox. The global inequality is falling, but inequality in every country is rising. To me, so let's look at inequality in India. According to me, inequality is like pollution. See, if we have industries, if we are going to produce steel and cement and aluminum and chemicals and refineries, we're going to have some, we're going to have emissions, we're going to have effluents, they are going to be pollutant. Of course, we can try and have strict pollution norms, but we are going to have pollution. So you cannot have industrial growth and zero pollution. But when the pollution starts going up, at some point as a society we think, so we introduce emission norms for cars, Bharat 1, Bharat 4, Bharat 6. We have stricter and stricter, so it used to be easier to set up a chemical unit in Patalganga, perhaps it's now, there are more stricter norms. But at some point, when you start looking at air quality, at some point as a society we say, this is too much pollution. So then we start making real trade-offs. It's okay to reduce industry, RA shed, we don't want that. That's of course a tipping point. I'm just saying, so as a society collectively we say, we want to make real trade-offs between pollution and growth, industrial growth. Inequality is like that. Economic growth necessarily will lead to inequality. Because economic growth is when Mr. Ambani is racing ahead, far ahead everybody. The scale of his thinking, the scale of Reliance or some other company is therefore the disproportionate gains to entrepreneurs. When entrepreneurs are successful, they create value, but a large part of the value goes to the guy, the brain behind the entrepreneurship. the guy who thought of the idea. So that is what contributes to economic growth. So economic growth is by nature an inequality causing phenomenon. But the idea is that it trickles down. So that's called trickle down economic. That people in the front of the race who are winning the race will get bulk of the benefits, but everybody, it trickles down to even the last person. But at some point, when this gap becomes too wide, it's the point where there's too much pollution in society. So just like pollution affects everybody, rich or poor, Hindu or Muslim or Parsi, similarly inequality in society affects us all. When it gets beyond a particular level, it reflects, manifests itself in terms of social instability, perhaps increasing crime, unemployment. So that's where, so we have to be careful what is that point. Now that is not for me to say. There is no economic theory which says itna inequality theek hai, usse zyada nahi hona. That's not. It's society as a whole collectively has to express their preference. So northern countries in societies in northern Scandinavia like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, their inequality is very less. They are much more equal societies. You go to China, as you said, Brazil is very unequal. So that's a collective preference of society. So I think as Indians we have to decide, are we comfortable with the fact that top 1%, as you said, own wealth more than the bottom 953 million people? Are we okay with that? If not, then how is this collective preference or will of the people going to be reflected? Through the democratic process.
As I see it,
It's not surprising that we are going to have elections in Delhi, a state called Delhi, on 8th of February, and one party is just appealing to the poor, the rickshaw drivers and the juggi jokri dwellers, and one party is appealing to the trading community. So I'm saying at some point when inequality becomes too much, now that too much is not for me to decide or for anybody, it's collective. It will manifest what the will of the people or the preference of society as well gets manifested through the democratic process. Thankfully, we have a very robust and very healthy democratic process.
Yes. I think I agree. Also, I think people.
Let me just conclude by saying, I personally believe that we have to have massive redistribution.
Yes.
In fact, when you said this new growth doesn't require capital, I think you're referring to the new economy. But we need massive amount of capital. That's called human capital. There's a huge skills gap. We don't want to land up in a society where a few elites are going to do the fintech smartness and large numbers of people, can't even handle a smartphone or can't even, operate this high-tech gadget. So we need large amount of human capital that requires investment in education and skilling and training. We require large amount of capital in public goods like infrastructure, like clean water, clean air. All that is investment, but that's a different kind of investment than the factories of the world.
So, Mr. Srinivasan, maybe I can take that to you now. And in the education sector, I think we tried vocational training. We've not really succeeded too much in that. Our education system is, to say that, in quite a bad shape. Considering all that, how will we manage? Because if we have a demographic advantage and we are unable to provide meaningful jobs, I'm not saying today it is like people have degrees but are not educated kind of situation. If that is the situation, entire demographic advantage can become a disaster. How do we manage?
Just take one more minute.
Yeah.
So the education system is so bad that I think some 15 lakh people appear for IITs, which are about 2,000 seats or 15,000 seats, and Maharashtra, industrialized state, half of all engineering colleges go empty.
Right.
They are offering scooters and all as incentives. This is the situation. In IITs, there is a mad scramble. At one point, I don't know if it's 10 million or 13 million people appear for those 15,000 seats.
Exactly.
And they go through 2 years of coaching, and half the engineering colleges in just Maharashtra, forget about Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. That's how bad the situation is, just for engineering.
Yeah.
I think all of us have said this ad nauseum. Skilling is paramount. And I am trying to bring it to a microcosm because we can talk every stuff. I believe and I think we must make an effort this 2% CSR, take that. People are compelled to spend, some do, some don't. It goes into many things. I'm saying it should be directed only to skilling. At the bank what we've done is we've set up skill centers, and I know that it's a micro part of what we need to do. But I'll give you a live example. If you go to a hospital, charity hospital, let's say, not even a charity, hospital I'm talking in a place called Richu. Somebody has given a 1 crore medical equipment, a scanner which can do everything. Even the blue colored plastic cover has not been taken off. That machine has been lying 1 year idle. So I asked why. Nobody knows how to operate it. So somebody has put a tick box saying that equipment given, equipment bought, entered some register, unused. Now I'm saying the skill development, and it's not like the country doesn't have, like I said, there are engineering colleges going empty, so the vocational skills are not there, the training is not there. We have to sort of maniacally direct the CSR spend towards that. And I've set up one in Karnal, one in Cochin, one in Coimbatore and one in Kolhapur, where the only job we're setting up is training for these kind of things, plumber, operator, machine operator, lathe operator, scanner, and if that done at scale, and I'm sure I've heard many good companies say that they have a target of X million by Y in a year, so and so, at least we are beginning to do this point that he was mentioning, the human capital that is required. I don't know how many of you followed Yuval Noah Harari in his speech in Davos. It is a mind-blowing one, and he talks of inequality in a very different fashion, and I don't remember what he meant. I don't remember the expansion. BCD, B into C into D will create AHH. If you want, Google it and see it. And fundamentally saying that the world order is, again, I go back to this world order changing, is that somebody is stealing, capturing your whole digital. Artificial intelligence will completely, it's not the economic inequality, it is the data inequality. Who masters data will absorb. So your biological behavior, if I am speaking, somebody may be thinking this bugger is bullshitting, that is read by data. And your body language is, that sensor is reading it and it's already telling the government who you are. So the level of power, the digital authoritativeness that is going to create inequality is another kind of inequality, is a reality that's facing us. But cut that apart, but again I go back to skill, which is what you mentioned, is just going to be a bigger requirement than setting up factories and industries. And to that, one solution is that mandatory 2% that we have to spend can be sharply directed towards, because there are hundreds of schemes that the government is doing on healthcare and other things. So maybe all corporate profit potential directed at only developing skill, because education institutions are not, sadly not producing the skill sets required. Maybe just mugging up and coming out and stuff like that. So that's one thing.
I just add to it. Favorite topic. So unlike the capital of the factories, where if you invest in capital, the return comes to the capitalist. The capital that we need to build in human capital are for the people who can't afford.
Right.
So this has got to be from other sources. CSR, I'm sorry to say,
that's another story.
All said and done, it's like, just to draw a parallel, in the US they used to believe this, India is stealing our jobs. So even the great Mr. Obama said, he introduced a new word called Bangalore. My job got Bangalore. Have you heard this? So, but the actual number of jobs, so unemployment rate in the US was about 8%, which is about 10 million people. And only about half a million people at best. So everybody thinks that 400,000 jobs mera gaya, 10 million. So similarly, this, I was saying CSR, that it's a good thing. India is unique in the world, only country in the world which has a CSR law. But sub milaki it's 20,000 crores. Even if everybody complied, 25,000. Our requirement is $1 trillion.
You got to make a beginning somewhere. You need to do something. Somebody has to inspire it.
Yeah, but Dipan, again now, shifting a little bit, what about ecology? We're talking about a $5 trillion economy. We've talked about the US, the model of, what you mentioned, it is mirroring production and consumption. So it is a consumption-driven model. Can we afford to follow that model? How much will we damage our ecology, the environment? And is there another method of achieving it? Because otherwise they're doing what the Western countries did. At that point in time there was no restriction, they used the resources. Can we follow the same model?
First of all, it's always going to be a consumption-driven economy. I think consumption as a driver for growth globally has been moving up only. But what change I notice is that the millennials, they are more responsible consumers. And they are more aware of the ecology and the environment and the problems that they will face as they get older. And therefore, they are in fact educating the older generation of how to consume responsibly. That is point number one. Point number two, I may be having some doubters when I say that ecology, environment and whatever processes and technologies work only when it is profitable. Otherwise, it is all just in namesake. So, unless we didn't have higher oil prices, that did not get the fracking industry going. And then because of that, we got the electrical vehicles coming into play. And today, I think if more and more wind and solar powers are being set up, it's because they are economically viable and not because they are required for the environment. End of the day, whether it's an industrialist or government or even we as people, we talk about the economy and the ecology, but we do what is best for our wallet. That is my understanding. Fortunately, I think a lot of technologies which are going to improve the environment, whether it's pollution or whether it is any of the challenges which we face environmentally, they have now become mainstream. Like for example, electric vehicles is not a question of whether they will come, but it's a question of when. And that's going to greatly impact pollution. These days, the percentage of energy generated by wind and solar farms is increasing dramatically, and it is making economic sense to do so as well. So I think that at the end of the day, a lot of talk will happen about improving the environment and the ecology, but it's going to be only possible if it is economically feasible. And fortunately, I think a lot of technologies have reached a stage of maturity where it is financially and ecologically possible to improve the environment. So while we may keep on talking about improving the environment, I think all the emotions are already in place. And as I said, I think the underlying foundation of this thing is responsible consumption by the new generation.
Again, to you, Mr. Ranade, the statistical data that we get has come under a lot of stress. A lot of talk has been there about whether that is reliable, not reliable, and we do need reliable statistics in order to make any kind of planning. What are your thoughts on that? Do we rely on the statistics? Are the statistics needs to be strengthened? The entire system around it needs to be strengthened?
Yes, data. In fact, I'm tempted to use the conversation from 2 minutes ago. So here's one data piece that you might be interested. Since he also referred to the pin code 40001, we talked about education, right? We talked about how half the engineering colleges are going empty. I bet in this room, among us, many of our kids actually either undergraduate or graduate, they go to either US, UK, Australia, New Zealand. Some people would even, Singapore, Russia. So India imports $8 to $10 billion of education every year. We talk about importing crude oil, we talk about importing gold. One of the fastest rising component is import of education. We are sending kids abroad. So that's one data piece, and sometimes you need to see it in that. But, so yeah, of course we need better data, we need better, we need to depoliticize, I don't know, sometimes as if, if you say in China, I believe there was a time when the Beijing government stopped, you are not allowed to publish that PMI, what is it called, the PMI count, the particulate, the 2.5 particulate count index. Because if you say the air quality has gone to that, but of course the American embassy had that, they used to broadcast it on Twitter and everything or whatever. So you can't use data broadcasting you can't politicize it. Data is data, right? So if GDP growth rate has fallen down to 4.2%, we should not call up that statistical point, boss, come here. Abhi kuch karo usko, 4.3 karo. That's not the way you deal with data. Because the first step is data before diagnosis and before you do policy. So I think one good news is that if the GST implementation happens and really in its spirit really does, then you will have real-time data on the economy. You won't need to wait for 2 months for the latest GDP forecast. And that is now going on. He mentioned that, I think what he was referring to that when he said that if you give a speech and you nod to the political, you say, hey, Jai, whatever, political leader, but they have data on your blood pressure inside your chest, you're getting frustrated. That data is being read by some monitor somewhere, and the leader knows that this fellow is not really praising me. It's of course very future, maybe not in science or science fiction, but it actually may happen. So same thing with data. With economic data, I think we will have real time. Already economists in my fraternity, they don't depend only on government data or RBI. They track how many cargo ships, they track railway cargo, they arrival and of tourist data, all kinds of stuff. So we are, in fact, I think Mr. Nilekani said, we are a data-rich country. And once that data-rich thing is captured in GST system, I think on that count I'm very optimistic that the data, reliable data hopefully will be gone. And by the way, I believe data is a public good. It should be made available free to everybody. Just like air quality index or temperature, Colaba and Santa Cruz mein kitna rainfall hua or kitna temperature, this should be public and free.
Yeah, I think it should be
I have a
available.
question. Is it possible to ask a question?
Yeah,
On data?
quick one, because we are actually now, I want to also have a session of quick fire questions with them, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
just because it relates to data. In India, especially because agriculture is something which is completely outside the mainstream economic system as such, because of the fact that agricultural income is not being taxed. So, how reliable is the data on agriculture that we are using for the purposes of saying that we have so much growth or so much contribution? This is a question that I have. I don't
It's
know.
quite reliable.
Maybe.
In fact, we have a very long tradition. First of all, 50% of India people are still directly or indirectly connected with agriculture. So it's not outside, it is the main system, I would say, 50-55%. But of course, it's not, they tend to be invisible. Secondly, the agriculture data is done by various triangulation methods. Crop sampling surveys, satellites, satellite imagery, data on, because fertilizer companies know how much fertilizer they are selling, water usage, electricity for pumps. So there's so many triangulation. And this is all when you triangulate this data, because you're looking at the same, the 7 blind men and the elephant. These are 7 not blind men, they are,
Wise men.
what is the opposite of blind? There are 7 men with vision looking at the same elephant, but from 7 triangulation. So I think crop sampling, agriculture data is pretty reliable on agriculture production. Now if you're saying they don't pay income tax, I heard you say they don't pay income tax. But ma'am, they have to buy soap and toothpaste and whatever,
No, that's right. They pay the.
So India has
GST,
indirect tax collection is
Indirect
far in
tax
excess of direct tax collection.
Yeah,
So
fair.
in fact,
No, I'm not talking about whether they pay tax or not. I'm not from that perspective. I'm talking about from the perspective of GST, collecting all the data. If that income is not connected with GST,
see,
then
all
do we have
of
that
food, the
income?
food system enters the GST at some point of time. Even though there is no GST on the sale of just food grain, eventually it will come, because for example it goes to the mandis. Of course, mandi is going to be dismantled, APMC. GST will capture it, and I'm reasonably sure if it's not 100% of GDP, even if we capture, let's say, 60% of GDP, even then it's good enough to get a good picture.
So I think we have a predominantly chartered accountant audience also here. So the question is, chartered accountants play a role in giving credibility to the financial statements, which is required if we want to have growth in the industry. The accountants have also come under a lot of bad publicity, and most of us here would like to believe that we're doing reasonably credible job, though there are maybe some cases of bad audits and stuff like that. What do you think a role the chartered accountant should be playing or are playing in the growth of the economy? To you first. Maybe this is the question quickly can be asked to all.
I think, I've said this always, CA are doing a spectacular job and have a extremely important and crucial role. There will always be some bad apples and we can't...
You have your board member on the
He
panel.
was, he's not, but I'll say this always, right? I am a huge fan, so there is no argument. There will always be some bad apples and one has to deal with it. I don't think that's a debate at all. Because you are the one who's smelling the gas. You can either sort of turn it off or let it go in flames. So I have no hesitation in saying that, and I don't believe, yes, there's a lot of press and noise around it, but that's always about bankers, so is about every community. And these are all flavor of the day. I believe that in any profession, if you're doing the stuff right, you will earn your stripes. And many years back, I was in a platform of the southern, I think I mentioned to Nilesh, the 3,000 chartered accountants in a room, and there was one RBI representative. I said, I'm better dealing with 3,000 you fellows than one RBI. So I'm happier to deal with 3,000 CAs and get your wrath than one RBI cancelling the license. So there's this, to my mind.
Dipan?
May I please?
See, so while it is the flavor of statements, so our PM said that मैं चौकीदार हूँ. So I think for me, the chartered accountant is the chowkidar. He may be appointed by the company management, but actually he is there to protect the management from their greed. And of course, he's there to protect the interest of the shareholders, the government also, the community at large. So for me, I think the chartered accountant, the auditor is really the most important person in the company. And he's protecting everybody's interests. And that's why I call him the chowkidar. And whenever I am buying any stock, the first thing I see is who is the auditor. And my only message to you as chartered accountants is that we need more and more large firms who can take the pressure of the management. Because I have been an auditor myself. I was an article clerk in A.F. Ferguson. And because of Ferguson's size, we could take pressure from anybody. We would tell Hindustan Unilever or M&M that no, this will not do, you have to pass this JV or you have to make these changes or you will follow this accounting policy. But what I see around is that still a lot of pressure comes on the chartered accountants to toe the management line. And that's because their livelihood depends on the management. So to that extent, there's a lot of pressure. But I would say that if the consolidation can take place, at least for the audit side, and you have a few large firms, who can stand up to the management, then I think the world will be a better place, because a lot of accidents which have happened in the economy could have been prevented if the auditor just stood up and said that, look, this is just not on, or, I want this information, or I want this data, because many times you as auditors also have this problem that the management doesn't share the right data with you. You come to know afterwards that this is what has happened over here, I did not even know. So I think the auditor and the chartered accountant have a very, very critical role to play in reaching this $5 trillion economy goal.
If I can add actually you said, I think that in any profession there are some bad apples, but I believe that your profession in fact has an extra responsibility. You're in the profession of providing authenticity, authentication, assurance, and solidifying trust. And in an era of fake news, and nowadays they can produce morph videos where the face of Obama in the voice of Obama is going to say some, so this is so in the era of fake news, it's even more important that this truth and authenticity that at premium. And if there's one profession which is the custodian of authentic stuff is you. So actually there's extra, I would say it's an extra responsibility, and you're a self-governing profession. So you cannot even afford a few bad apples. The moment you see a bad apple around, you should.
So, okay, one question, because then we go into the quick fire.
There was a mention made of scaling the youth. How about scaling politicians at the governance level? Your take, please, all the panelists.
Skilling of the government politicians.
There is a school right here in Mumbai, just the outskirts. You heard of this Rambao Malgi Center? They actually train how to be a good politician and policy maker. So they have been doing it for the last 25-30 years. And we need more of those kind of schools, because politics is of course a full-time profession in India. So I think we also need to make politics boring, like in Belgium, let's say. If you go and ask people, यहाँ पे तो every बच्चा knows who is your MLA, local MLA, MP. So we need to do two things. We need to have professional politicians, so more training for them, and we have schools like this Margi, and we need to make politics more and more boring.
So in your experience in India, which data is not getting into the GDP, which causes us a worry? You know that all data is not collected. Some data is definitely missing. Is there anything like that? The public perception is that some data is missing. Because there is no structured system to collect the data itself. Like the small weekly market, daily markets in many places.
See, first of all, we are a very large country, okay? 1.3 billion people. So necessarily, but fortunately we have a very long statistical tradition. I mean, even it's globally recognized. Even the World Bank came much later. So, but in a large country, the best way of measuring economic activity is what is called through sampling. But the sampling methodology has to be kept on improving and fine-tuned. Of course, I told you GST and real-time data and monitoring and AI, introduction of big data, machines, all that helps. But this sampling methodology, so recently the controversy about this consumer surveys, which showed that consumer spending had actually declined in the last 5 years. They then found out that there is some problem with the methodology. That's why they just suppressed it, which created so much doubts and suspicion in the minds of people. They should just open it up, saying, "Dekho, ye faulty data. You experts, please have a look at it." So so we basically, I don't think the Indian economy, there are dark spots, because sampling is done on a large scale. I mean, across the economy, and as I said, there are triangulation methods. The same data is seen from the expenditure side, from the income side, from the production side. So kahin na kahin wo aa jata hai, even if we have a large informal sector. But we need to be open about these things. You know, sampling data, raw data should be made openly available to experts to analyze. Let there be an open debate. Don't suppress it if it's showing something uncomfortable.
My view on data, it should pass the smell test, and I have a feeling that it's better to be approximately right than perfectly wrong. And I think we are trying to get to a perfection space. It's impossible. Like he said, 1.3 million there. Like he also said, the cash economy, that despite all the effort of digitalizing and traffic, that's going to be a reality. But we have a sense. I think we over intellectualize the lack of that last 10% of data. It's not going to change the picture materially. Right? You could argue it will be decimal points change. So I think to be perfectly right is a utopian situation. Get it approximately right and just move on, and life will be a lot better. But then we want debates like this, right?
Yeah.
We'll all have nothing to do.
No, so I think last 10 minutes we'll have some quick fire questions. Expect you to answer it in 1 or 2 sentences maybe. So, I'll give you more than that, I'll give you 2 sentences maybe. Ranade, the GDP growth is 10 years, 12 years, 15 years low. Sensex all-time high. What's happening?
4 things, I think. One is that global liquidity is huge. There is, the central bank of USA balance sheet is 4 times bigger. So that money has to go somewhere, number one. Second, after demonetization with SIP, what he said, spectacular increase in financial savings, and they're all coming into the stock market through SIP. And SIP habit is sticky. You commit to 3 years, but you don't remember to disengage. Third, the Sensex is at an all-time high, but it's hiding a very, very big skew. 3 or 4 stocks, TCS, Reliance, HDFC Group, Bank, and other things are contributing to the 50-60% movement. In the US also, the US stock market is also at an all-time high, and they have a broader index called S&P 500. The top 5 stocks, market cap is more than the bottom 282. So these are my 3 reasons, and then so it is disconnected, right? It's not reflecting on it.
Ritik stocks and Salman, right? Yes. He would know. I'm planning to change to HDFC Federal. Then my stock will also go. You need those 4 alphabets in the stock. It just will change them. But truth be told, I think the issue is probably searching for quality in times like this. There's a gravitation to what is deemed quality. He's a master at it, you would know. But this is my summary of the situation where there is a massive gravitation. So probably concentration to that. The index is weighted with these fellows. So it's just ballooning the index. Would I be right, sir?
Absolutely. But I think it's changing very fast. And last 2-3 months we are seeing the breadth of the market improve phenomenally. And I think that 2020 will be the inflection point where you will see a reversal of individual stocks and smaller indices, sectoral indices outperforming the Nifty in the Sensex.
And to you, Mr. Srinivasan, again, this process about the IBC, it has sort of helped resolve certain problems, but also a lot of people believe that the bankers are now not taking a decision, it's convenient to just pass it on to the IBC process. Not it?
Partially there is some, but everything goes back to the unfortunate events that have happened in the more recent past and the fear that kicks in. But if the IBC process, which it will, I'm sure, with more data and more performance behind it, it will get to a point where moving to it is good outcome for everybody. There's a certain degree of independence that is there, a certain degree of transparency that is there. The process is taking longer. Now, whether bankers move it there or resolve it on that is only a matter of time. That will get cured. But IBC as a construct is good as long as it doesn't delay the process. Though currently the experience has not been that good, but I'm assuming that one or two examples created will get to be being a better part.
Ranade, protectionism. The world is moving towards more and more protectionism. How should India respond? Have its own protection or try and fight the system?
This I cannot answer in 2 sentences. Because
Make it 3.
I think we have to realize that economic reforms, especially trade liberalization, is to our own benefit, unilateral. If you want to make Indian industry competitive, if you want to grow your exports, you need to be able to export to the global community, which means you have to meet global standards of excellence, quality, cost, and price. So even if the rest of the world is turning a little bit protectionist, by the way, when they say protectionist, US ka duties have gone from 2-3% to 15%. Our duties are already 15%. So when we go from 15 to 10, we call it aur hum log open kiya. When they go from 3 to 12, they are in production. So let's realize that the pendulum is swinging from the other side. But I feel that one sentence answer is that there is some benefit to India trying to keep away from protectionism for our own benefit. And we have, I'm not saying it just like that, we have seen the effect of trade liberalization since 1991. And the good news today is that we are actually now exporting mobile phones.
Right.
So let's not just export mobile phones and textiles, but a whole variety of industrial products and agro-processing products.
So Dipan, which are the few companies that you see in the top 20 of the Fortune 500 companies in the next 3 years?
Next 3 years from India, Fortune 500, I think the list will not change much. But the more relevant thing is that
the potential of going there at least.
Yeah, I think that we are going to see this next 10 years we'll see a complete change of the leadership. It's bound to happen. And the companies which were in the top 10, 20 for the last 10 years, that is going to change. And my sense is that the market is fast reaching a stage of maturity where we can actually list a unicorn. It's not yet happened in India. I think most of the companies get listed, they come when they are actually profit making. But I think not in the near future we'll have a situation where a large company which is still bleeding like an Amazon or like a Uber will get listed in India, and that will tremendously increase the market capitalization, and you will suddenly find that company is going all the way into the top 10 in terms of market capitalization. So we are reaching over there. Apart from that, I think next 3-4 years you will see a lot of insurance companies gain a lot of traction and become part of the index or among the top 25-30 type of market capitalization. And then I think the usual suspects, I think banks will continue to grow and prosper. I think the best secular story in India that I can see, which has a good track record and a good visibility for earnings, is private sector banks and retail lending. So I think that's going to gain much more traction and becoming more and more mainstream. Already I think they're a very large proportion of the Nifty, the Sensex, but I don't see that situation changing very soon.
So since we are in the budget fever now, already getting into it, the last question to all 3 of you, maybe beginning with you, is 3 recommendations, 3 things that you would want this budget to bring about.
I think we have to recognize that this is a year of inadequate aggregate demand. So number 1 is to do something to the consumption spending. Number 2 is to also do the same thing for investment spending. And number 3 is try not to go too much out of, fiscal stimulus is required, but the fiscal deficit should not be, really like a disproportionately large.
I'll go back to my original ABCD.
Okay.
The same set, but I use acronyms. He said it in a different way, but broadly the same.
Okay.
Well, I have virtually no expectations on the budget. So my 3 expectations, so to speak, would be no increase in taxes. We keep on going to the budget hoping for lower taxes, and from somewhere some googly will come or something will happen, some deduction is taken away and tax end of the day goes up. So hopefully there is no increase in tax on anyone. It's a good budget. That is one part. Second, I think that if there is more transparency in government finances, and there's a lot of discussion on that, so if we can see that in the budget, the right fiscal deficit number or more realistic projection, that is the second hope and expectation. And third, for God's sake, a shorter speech.
That is true. I think we would all hope that one day the finance minister gets up and says, this is the budget, but no amendments to the Finance Act. So that would really be the day. What do you think about the personal taxes? It should go down or not go down?
I think that, well, that's the desire. I believe it should not. I know I'll be hated for saying that. It should be going towards the directing to the spend that needs to happen, and rather than enable it at that point. You know, if you save 4,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees at an individual level, I don't know if it will alter the course of the consumption. So I would think the end use, whatever is the productive investment, that should be enabled. That's what I think.
Maintain the GDP deficit, according to you? Keep that target of not more than 3%.
No, we actually have room to go up to 3.8% and still be within the FRBM law.
Right.
So actually this point, there's a fair bit of this.
Because this is the time to play around. I think there are many other important factors too. Okay, that is it. I think we had a fantastic discussion. The fact that it's almost 8 o'clock and everybody is glued to the seats is a testimony to how interesting the discussion was. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. In the true tradition of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, may I request the President to give an instant memory as our remembrances to the panel of speakers today.
Exit ticket at the gate there.
I'll also take a coffee.
But before I exercise my privilege of giving a vote of thanks, a few announcements on the forthcoming events. We have a flagship event on the lecture meeting of budget by Shri Pinakin Desai on 5th of February at Yogi Sabhagru. It's open for all. On the Friday 7th and 8th of February, we have for our members and their spouses a leadership retreat, which is organized by the HR committee of DCS. On the 20th of February, there is a lecture meeting on analytics and artificial intelligence at the BCS. There is on Friday 21st and Saturday 22nd, we have a workshop on understanding MLI, that is multilateral instruments, at Orchid Hotel. On 5th of February and 9th of March, till that 9th of March, there is an in-IS residential study course organized by Accounting and Auditing Committee at Alia Diva Goa Hyatt. And on Thursday 23rd to Sunday 26th, there is a 14th residential study course on GST at Taj Swarna, Amritsar. And now let me have this privilege of giving a vote of thanks to this very distinguished panel of speakers. I believe ever since the human society started scaling up on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there has been this eternal question as to what should be the goal, whether an easy target accomplished or to be accomplished, or have something as a challenge which can really drive the best out of you. And this has been a debate going on from long. But what is important is, as the panelists very rightly pointed out, is it is not that whether the target is achievable. How is it going to be achievable and in what time? And at some time even the time does not matter, because eventually when we dream of something, when we have something as stiff target, we would govern ourselves by a system or systemic adjustments working towards that goal. So the questions that very well answered were whether the growth was achievable, yes, in what time frame, eventually, that's not really important, but are we geared to really meet this objective by way of investing in human capital, by understanding the changing pattern of the society and the consumption and the thinking of the youngsters who have, who's what is called as a millennial crowd. And I think each panelist has answered this very well. Thank you, sir, for being here with us and delivering this knowledge once again, maybe in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
1 minute.